Everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at photography. This will be our last unit, our last topic that we're going to cover for the first unit. And I wanted to apply some of the ideas that we've been studying on the visual arts to photography. And this is going to help you with the upcoming photography project. And I want you to be able to apply the principles of creating an image and the ideas of what go into an image to something that you can create for yourself. And just to give you some background information, the idea of photography was actually kind of it has ancient roots to it in what is known as the camera obscura. Camera obscura is actually Italian for camera means room and obscura means dark, and it refers to a darkened room. And the idea of a camera obscura goes back to ancient China, goes back to ancient Greece. It's referred to and even in ancient Egypt. And the idea of the camera obscura is just that when you take a dark room, or in this case on the right hand side you see a dark box, light will enter that room and then it will project on the on a wall within it. I wanted to show you the actual process. And so the idea of a camera obscura is something that artists used to use to create realistic images. They'd create a darkened room, allow a little bit of light to come through, just a little tiny hole, and then that the image of the outside would be projected on the inside. It would just be inverted. I want to show you the process. Maybe you guys can work on this this weekend. You guys get bored of baking sourdough bread at home. Maybe you can take a look at this technique and see if you can replicate it.
Camera obscura is a dark room, any size, that has an opening looking out into the world. Through that opening, an upside-down image of the outside actually gets projected on the back of that room. It's a very simple physical process.
So as I mentioned, artists knew this technique in the Renaissance and in the Baroque era, and they used this in order to create their realistic type images, or some of their realistic type images, where they would have a person or sometimes a landscape, and then they would just kind of trace over it and then flip it upside down and create their realistic image. But the idea that the photograph does is it takes that light coming from the outside of in a darkened room, and just find a way for them to be able to keep that light on a surface. And so at first it was used by it was a silver nitrate, and they would expose the camera or expose the silver nitrate to the light source, and then wait over a couple of days, and then you would have that image. But the idea of a camera, right there, we talk about, does your phone have a camera on it, actually refers to camera obscura. They just dropped the obscura part and kept the camera, but it's Italian for room. This is the first known photograph by Joseph Nicephore Niepce, and this is just, he's taking that idea of how do we, use kind of this idea of allowing light to enter, and then having some type of filament or sheet that is light sensitive, that it can then create the image on that. And so this would be the he was using a silver nitrate. And so this is him just kind of taking a look outside the window. Here you see a silo. He's kind of off in the country in France. And this is some type of space shuttle that no, I'm just kidding. I don't know what this particular image is. You can tell how it's kind of fuzzy and a little bit difficult. And then in 1907, the Lumiere brothers, a couple of French photographers and filmmakers, said if we use a blue, green, and yellow plate, we can create the sense of a color. And so the first color plating was used in 1907, but it wasn't widely used until the 1970s. Different types of cameras. You have the point-and-shoot camera, which is going to be the camera that's on your phone, or that you'll generally see in a store, where mainly what you have with a point-and-shoot camera is everything's pretty much automated. You cannot change the lens. But with a reflex camera, as you see on the bottom left, a reflex camera, you can choose the lens, and it gives you a lot more versatility, a lot more flexibility to be able to create your images. And I want to go through some of those elements that you'll find in a reflex camera to be able to see how you can use these elements in order to really enhance your photographs. Taking a look at the first element that I want to take a look at is the focal length. The focal length is the distance between the lens and the image sensor. And so the smaller the distance, right, to the image sensor is going to have a wider angle to it. And so one way to think about this is if you were to take your finger and your thumb and create a circle to it, the closer you put to that circle to your eye, the wider area you can see, and the further away that you bring that, the less that you can see. And it's a similar kind of mind, or a similar kind of idea that we have with the difference between a wide and a telephoto. The higher the number means the larger the lens, the further away it is from the image sensor, and you're going to have a different focal point within that. And so here you see different types of lenses. This is going to be a wide lens, 200 millimeter, 50 millimeters, about what the eye normally sees, and 100 millimeter will be a telephoto, and this one is a 500 millimeter telephoto lens, which has a tremendous amount of range that it can reach. But something like this is probably going to cost about $20,000, sometimes up to $30,000, just for the lens itself. Thinking about the differences, so the question is, well, what focal length do you want to use? And it's going to depend upon what effect that you want to create, right? So here you see 7 millimeter or 70 millimeter versus 105 millimeter, all the same image, right? But the question is, do you want to capture more of the landscape, or do you want to capture more of the birds? Or in this case, with the barn and then the mountain in the background, right? Do you want to capture more of the vastness of the background, or do you want to capture more of the barn? Again, it's just the effect that you're trying to create within that. And of course, if you're a photographer, you could actually physically move closer to the barn if you want to just represent the barn, or you can just simply, use your telephoto lens. It just depends on how close you can get and what effect that you want. But there is some differences in how they're capturing the foreground and the background. This one is just a 50 millimeter normal lens that you just see kind of as the eye would see. But as we start to get the wide angle, what you'll notice is that the foreground begins to be emphasized, and it starts to exaggerate the distance between them. And so here you see the same image here that we have in the humanities department, to sculptures that we have, the same shot, right? But emphasizing more of the foreground here and exaggerating the distance between them. But again, the question is, what effect do you want to have? Do you want to exaggerate the foreground and exaggerate the distance, or do you want to lessen that? So what a telephoto does, whereas a wide-angle lens will exaggerate distance, telephoto lens will compress it. And so it'll make it seem as though the foreground and the background are almost the same amount of distance between them. And so here you see the moon and this tree here. It seems as though they're on top of one another in order to to minimize the distance. And here you see the same image with the 200 millimeter lens. Sorry, my mouse keeps changing the slide every time I touch it. But here you see it's compressing distance. And so with that, I just want to kind of go through, there's just kind of a brief in-video quiz with you, which lens is being used. And so something to think about is what's happening with the foreground and what's happening with the background. And if it's being exaggerated, it's going to be wide. If it's minimized, it's going to be telephoto, right? And so this one would be a wide angle. And then again, which lens is going to be used? This is going to be a telephoto, right? So it compresses the distance between them. So the question is, what effect do you want the viewer to see? What effect do you want the viewer to really feel? And so as we go through these, I want you to think about what's being used. Is this a wide angle or a telephoto lens? Generally, a wide angle lens will also create kind of a fishbowl effect. The closer you get to it, as it exaggerates the distance of what's in the foreground, it generally creates this kind of roundedness that's distortion of the foreground. Or this one, which is going to be used here, is this a wide angle or telephoto, right? Wide angle or telephoto for both of them. With this one is a room in the Louvre in Paris. Is this a wide angle or telephoto, right? Is it distorting the distance, kind of exaggerating it, or is it compressing it? Or this one, is it exaggerating the distance or compressing it? And here again, the effect that the artist, that the photographer wanted to create is this journey, right? They begin their journey in the marriage. They now have all this long, distant road ahead of them together. And then again, this one, is this a wide angle or telephoto, right? Is it compressing distance or is it exaggerating distance? Or this one, wide angle or telephoto, right? Is it exaggerating the forefront or foreground and kind of maximizing the sense of space in the background? And then again, just to get you a sense of, as you go through this, some things to think about, right? The wide angle versus the telephoto. This is the same exact shot, but just done with different lenses. And so again, you have to think about what is it that you really want to create. You want to really emphasize the flowers and the impressive distance that's in the background with the mountains, or do you want to make the mountains kind of seem like they're upon them, right? So these are the same mountains, right, and the same flowers right here. But what we have is that these flowers seem as though they're further away than the flowers up here, right? So again, what we have with the telephoto is it's making them seem as though they're on top of one another. They're just kind of compressed, and it makes the background seem as though it's right on top, right? And that's really kind of far in the distance. So again, it's just kind of getting you to think about what effect you want to create. And so then you can also create some interesting effects with telephoto lenses that make it feel as though, right, you're kind of creating some illusions here. Here's some illusions that CNN issued, kind of some of the best photography shots to make it seem as though, right, they're playing around with different camera lenses. But again, thinking about portraits, generally a 120 millimeter is kind of a medium telephoto lens, and this is usually considered the best portrait setting because if you take a look at the normal view, what you have with a portrait is you're going to have that a little bit more of that distortion, and you're going to see that. I'm going to show you a couple other images of the same person. This is Brother Williams. He teaches in the humanities department. You're going to see the same image of him, but as we get to the wide angle, notice what happens to his face, right? So this is kind of more of a natural feel to it, but notice how his face starts to distort. This one, the 35 millimeters, what most cameras have, and so when you have this, when you kind of have the selfie, generally you're going to have that distortion of the face. And then a 28 millimeter or an extremely, getting wider and wider, 24 millimeter, notice how the face starts to really distort. And then the background of the humanities office is kind of getting more and more distant from us, right? And then here's a very wide 18 millimeter, and look how his face is now, it feels as though he's kind of, we're looking at him through a fishbowl, something to that effect. Think about composition. I also want you to think about where you're placing things in relationship to one another. I want to go over the bullseye, the rule of thirds, and thinking about framing for them. A bullseye generally just means that you're putting the camera at the very center of the image, and then This is going to be at the kind of like if you were creating a crosshairs or looking at through like a sniper rifle or something. This is putting the most important center right at the very center, the most important thing at the very center. This is a shot that I took in Paris of the Eiffel Tower, and I just wanted to frame the Eiffel Tower at the very center. But generally, when you're doing portraits, you want to follow more of what is known as the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds essentially suggests that if you were to divide your camera into grids, and some cameras do this, there's a setting for this, that the most important element is going to be either on the top or the bottom third line. And so with a portrait, you generally want to put the eyes at the top third line, either to one of the third lines on the right-hand side or one of the third lines on the left-hand side, because that's generally how we're naturally seeing the world. And so it just makes it look a little bit more natural, as though we're kind of having a conversation with her. And so the photographer of this National Geographic cover put her eyes at the very center to make it feel as though it's natural. And that's where our eyes kind of naturally go. And that way there's not a lot of empty space up here. But this one with Clint Eastwood, we can notice that this one is more on, it kind of drops. The eyes with the rule of thirds should be up here. But here he drops it towards the center. And so he wanted to focus on Clint Eastwood's eyes being at the very center. But for the most part, photographers are going to put the eyes at the top thirds line to give it that more of a natural look. And here we see some modeling that's being done here. But notice how the eyes are always going to be on that top third line. And any type of film that you watch or TV show, whenever there's going to be a close-up of a character, you're going to notice that it's going to be on that top third line. Or here we see Dorothea Lange's The Destitute Mother, following the same principles. We see this again and again and again. And we can also apply this to landscapes as well. Generally, you're going to put the most important element here. This was me taking a picture in Lucerne, Switzerland, and I put this water tower at the very kind of on that third line over here to kind of direct our attention towards that to make it seem as though it's natural. However, what we see with landscapes is a little bit different. Rather than putting the landscape on the horizon line on the top third, you drop it to the bottom third. But it's the same kind of idea. So this would be the halfway point within this particular photograph. But you generally want to drop the horizon line to make it on the bottom third. And that's where we naturally see. Where when we're talking with people kind of eye to eye level, we kind of have the eyes just a little bit above, right? You put it on the top line. But when we go out and see nature, generally we're looking at the horizon line. It's generally a little bit lower. And so in photography, you drop the rule of thirds and make it feel a little bit more natural. This one, the question is whether the horizon line is too high or not. In some ways, as we think about the composition, as we think about placement, right? Generally, the horizon line traditionally would be considered too high. However, I think what the artist was trying to capture with this one is capturing the texture of the water. And so I think that he or she decided to put that horizon line at the top third line in order to emphasize the space of the water between the camera and the shoreline. But we also have to think about the message, right? As we're thinking about the ideas of how to create an idea through visual art. I want you to think about what idea, when you focus on your photography projects, what idea are you creating? And this one I found on one of my friend's Facebook pages. I thought it was kind of interesting. The message, I think it's kind of interesting that the photographer chose to do this where she's kind of pulling up and the groom is just anxiously waiting for his bride. But I mean, the message here is almost as though she kind of rolls down the window, she smiles, and then they peel out, and he kind of is left at the altar. And so, I don't know, I can kind of see where the photographer was trying to get this sense of trying to capture both of them in this kind of cool reflection on the window. But I don't know, I'm not sure it necessarily works for this particular image. Okay, one other element that I wanted to just go over is the idea of aperture. And aperture just refers to the opening or gap within the image sensor. And the large, when we talk about f-stop, we're talking about aperture, and that just means that, you know, how wide or how narrow the image sensor is. And the larger the hole, right, you're going to have a shorter depth of a field, a shorter slice that's going to be in focus. And the smaller the hole, the larger the depth of field is going to be in range. But they use these numbers as though they are fractions. And so the larger the number actually means the smaller the hole. The larger the number means the smaller the number means the larger the hole. And I just wanted to show you how that actually works within photography. And so here you see the f2 stop, so you have a large hole coming with a lot more light and image coming in. You're going to have a larger slice of life, and so the focus is going to be mainly on this person taking a photograph in the foreground and not so much on the person in the background. But when you put the f-stop at f22, it's going to have a smaller hole. There's going to be a larger range, so both the foreground and the background are in focus at the same time. And here we see kind of a similar idea to that. And so what we want to focus on as, you know, future photographers, or, you know, future amateur photographers, I guess, is what do we really want the viewer to really focus on? Do we want the viewer to focus on everything? And maybe that's the case. Or do we really just want to shift the attention of the viewer to one thing or another? And so, as we see with these two images, it sends very different kind of messages, right? Where we see the father kind of figure in the background, and then the two boys. Sorry, my mouse is just really acting crazy today. The father in the foreground and the two kids in the. So it's suggesting that these two kids are kind of overshadowed by this fatherly figure. Or do you want to create the message that the other two figures are mainly a little bit less relevant to this person, and this person is the main focal point? So again, it just depends on how you want to frame the message, how you want to create that image. And then advertising does this all the time, right? To direct our attention to the actual product being sold rather than, you know, the background. And so here we see the focus on the one ball, or we see the focus here on the figures that are modeling the clothes rather than their background. And so this is just a way of, this is called depth of field. It's just a way of focusing on one thing and then putting the background, it's putting it making it a little bit more fuzzy. But what that does is it frames the actual image that you want to focus on. And you can do some interesting things with this. Here's a zebra using the aperture setting in order to create this sense that the eyes and the face is, you know, really focused, but then the back is a little bit more distorted. But that does provide that framing, right? That around the head of the zebra. And I also want to talk about shutter speed. Shutter speed just refers to how fast the image sensor opens and closes, right? And so the slower that it is, it will blur motion. The faster that it is, captures motion. So here you see the slow motion here, which creates this sense as it starts to blur the motion, creating this cascading effect of the water coming down on this waterfall. Or if you wanted to have a really fast one where it just kind of opens and closes really quickly, then you can capture each particular droplet, right? But again, the question is, what effect do you want to create? Do you want to capture, kind of freeze the motion in, you know, midair, or do you want to blur it? And again, it just depends on the effect that you want to have. And so as we go through these, I just want to throw kind of an in-video quiz for you to consider which one is being used here. Is this going to be fast motion or is this slow motion, right? Is it blurring action or is it capturing it? What about this one? Is this one fast motion or slow motion? Right, so is it blurring action or is it capturing kind of each essence? This one, fast motion or slow motion? And then there's this one. Is this one fast motion? Is it blurring motion or is it capturing it? Fast motion or slow motion? This one's a little bit tricky. It almost seems, because this is done with fast motion, it almost makes it seem as though she's not really moving. But then we take a look at the background, we can see that kind of blur in the background, which then we know that her, right, that is her kind of movement is frozen with the fast motion. Or this one, right? Is this one fast motion or slow motion? And there's also some interesting things that you can do at night with slow motion. With slow motion, you can actually make light bend, right? As the shutter kind of opens and closes really slowly, it starts to blur the actual line of a piece of light. This one here, fast motion or slow motion, right? Or this one, again, capturing the use of the shutter speed at night to blur the sense of light, to create a sense of movement as it spells dove. Or is this one fast motion or slow motion? Is it blurring it, or is it like kind of a crystal image? Fast motion or slow motion. And then fast motion or slow motion. Just and each one, right? It's not like one is better than another, or one, focal length is better than another. It's just getting a sense of what message you want to convey, what mood you want to set. And this one was taken at O'Hare Airport over 1.5 minutes, right? Or this one, Oxford Circus in England. What's the effect that we want to create, right? Here you can see kind of this car. That's kind of a faint image of a car passing by at night that gives it this kind of haunting feeling. Or this one with Michael Phelps, right? The last thing I want to take a look at is lighting, what is known as the ISO setting on the cameras. This is an international organization for the standardization. Not really the most exciting name, so most people just call it the ISO, and the ISO just refers to the lighting, and lighting refers to how much light the camera allows into the image. And so what we see is that ISO increments are in doubles between 400, 800, 1600, sometimes 200, right? 800 or 400 is generally considered the normal, and 800 will need less light for a normal exposure, and 100 will need more daylight. So the question that you have with this is, if you're taking an image out in the middle of the day, like at noon or something, on a very bright day, you want to decrease the ISO setting in order to allow less light in, because you already have so much light, right? But if you're taking that same shot at night and it starts to become a little bit darker, it's becoming dusk, you want to increase the ISO setting to allow as much light as possible into your camera. So it just refers to the sensitivity, right? So if you already have a lot of light, you can reduce the ISO setting to not allow that much light in, to keep it kind of standard. But if you don't have a lot of light, or if there's not a lot of natural light, you can increase the ISO setting in order to allow as much light in, to allow the camera to be more sensitive to that light. And so just different settings create a different type of effect. And so here you see with I like this image here with the candles. Here you can see the 100 where it's not allowing a lot of light in, versus the 3200 where it's trying to capture a lot more light, capture a lot more of the surroundings. And then you also have to think about, as the ISO setting, if it's too low, it's going to create digital noise, right? So you want to make sure that your ISO setting, if you have limited light, you crank up that ISO setting to capture as much light as possible. A couple images that I took. This one is in Florence with David, and then here's another Michelangelo image called Moses that I took in Rome. Both of them, they didn't necessarily have. I took both of these during the kind of the evening hours, and my camera was a little bit old that I took from. Well, at least my phone was a little bit old that I took, and so it didn't necessarily have the ISO setting on it. So you can see how grainy it really is. And so if I would have had a better camera, more modern camera, then I would have been able to increase the ISO settings and be able to capture a better, more clear image than the kind of the static that we see there. I also want you to think about the type of lighting, right? Not just about how much lighting. The ISO refers to how much light the camera is allowing in, but we also have to think about the lighting in the surrounding area and where it's coming from, right? So we have to think about, what's the effect? Is this particular image here, is this too much light? Or are you trying to create kind of this dreamlike feelings of someone's kind of having some type of heavenly or divine experience? The question gets us to think about, what do we really want to affect? What effect do we want to feel? Or this one, think about the direction of the light is also important as well. If you have strong side lighting, we have to think about what's the effect. And generally what we see here is when part of the face is lit and the other part is dark. We saw this with Rembrandt, that some of the object feels as though it's conflicted, right? Or there's a problem that this person is having or going through. Or this one here, and again, a strong side lighting casting that deep shadow on the left-hand side of the image creates more of a sense of her kind of trouble. We can kind of see all of the wrinkles that she has, sense this kind of conflicted life, this kind of full life that she's lived. But if we do an open shade, what open shade does is generally, this is what you'd have if you go to a professional photographer and they have something that looks like an umbrella. What the umbrella thing, the shade will do, is it takes the light and it bounces the light off of that shade and it just scatters it everywhere. So that way it's not as though it's coming from one direction or another. It gives it a softer feel. And so with this particular image, is creating a softness for this little girl to kind of create this kind of angelic or innocent kind of feel. Or we also have, backlighting. Backlighting is another effect that you can have where the camera is mainly going to focus on the brightest elements within an image. And so if you do it bright, you can focus on perhaps here the sun or the sun setting, and then standing in front of it, you're going to look as though you're in the shadow, and it's going to create an interesting effect. And so again, thinking about where the lighting is coming from, how it's affecting a particular work of art or a particular photograph, that's something that you want to consider as you create your photography projects.